Hi, Laura. Stephanie and I are so honored to have you on our show today during this difficult time in the world. And I know you are crazy busy working with schools and responding to anti-Semitic events that are happening on a daily basis in our community. And we just want to have you on the show so we can talk about some of all of this stuff that's going on in the world. And before we get started, one thing that we like to ask all of our guests that come on the show is, what is one of your non-negotiables to start your day?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me, Marnie and Stephanie. And I just want to say that this is exactly what needs to happen in our community and in our world are these conversations. So thank you, thank you, thank you. One non-negotiable really for me in the morning is I have to take time for my own self-care. Like I have a yoga mat set up, I have weights set up, and no matter what kind of routine I do, like that has to happen. And I've realized since October 7th and the JCRC where I work we do the intake for the casework that's happening around anti-Semitic incidences. I need that more than ever. So I just need that grounding every day.
Absolutely. And like you said, especially right now, you have to fill up your own cup before you can help all the people that you're helping right now. So let's dive in, Laura. You know, everyone has a journey, and we'd love for you to share with our audience the kind of work that you do and why this work is so important to you and a little bit about how you got here.
Sure. Thank you. I am Director of Holocaust Education at the Jewish Community Relations Council of Minnesota and the Dakotas. I've been there for 19 years. Before that, I was a public school teacher in St. Paul. And the journey really, it just went from sort of leaving the district for various reasons to becoming part of their speakers bureau. So my mom was a child in hiding during the Holocaust. My grandfather and extended families members were taken from Athens, Greece to Auschwitz and gassed. And so that's part of my family DNA. That's just always been with me. And so as I found out more about the JCRC, as I was making this transition, a friend of mine asked me to come on and do some work. And then it just evolved into projects, curriculum, resources, trainings. And then it actually bounced up to a project with the Smithsonian in Washington, D.C., which I am a consultant for, and it's called The Bias Inside Us. And it's a traveling exhibition about implicit bias and how it plays out in all of us and how it affects how we form attitudes about each other. And so I feel super fortunate, like one just sort of snowballed into the other. But, so all my work, I feel, has been rooted in education.
The work that you're doing is so amazing and so important. And I would love to see that Smithsonian exhibit at some point.
Thank you.
I know.
Yeah.
Where is it right now?
It was here. It was here twice at the Science
really?
Museum. Yeah, it was. It's short, it stays for 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 4 weeks. It's moving. One of the goals of the Smithsonian, which is kind of a downfall in the schedule, was that they wanted it to move around the country a lot. And we raised the money to have it be also free wherever it goes. And the Smithsonian doesn't do that. Like their traveling exhibitions are tens of thousands of dollars. But this, we wanted to not be blocked behind museum walls. So it's in community centers, it's on campuses, it's at city halls. Right now, it is in Greenville, South Carolina, on its way to LA, to the Japanese American Museum out in LA, California. And it'll go to 2 more sites, one in Santa Clara and one in, I believe, the Oakland School District.
Oh, wow.
That's so cool.
Amazing. Yeah.
Yeah.
So changing gears a little bit, I'm wondering if you can define anti-Semitism for us and just talk about Jewish identity as well and how that's all connected.
Yeah. So anti-Semitism is really this form of hatred or mistrust, contempt for Jews. And it's based on myths. It's based on stereotypes. And anti-Semitism is a different kind of beast than, let's say, racism or sexism. It invokes this belief that Jews have extraordinary influence And that's meant to control or harm societies. So it's this conspiracy theory level, right? Yet it also has this other level at the same time, which is that Jews are not deserving. Like, during the World War II, Jews were subhuman, right? They were blamed for society's ills. So you have to be able to understand these two sides of anti-Semitism. And we have this saying that, and Deborah Lipstadt, who's a scholar in anti-Semitism, coined, which was anti-Semitism involves people thinking they're punching up to this conspiracy network and punching down to these people they consider less than them. And that's different than racism. Racism, there is a clear power dynamic where people of a superior race feel superior to those less inferior. That's the theory behind it.
Which is really helpful to understand that, because that distinction that you just made was really important for everyone to understand and to hear.
And it can become harder to detect, right? And so just the whole definition, then things that are anti-Semitic sometimes go into this like, really? Is it really like this denial thread, right? Is that really anti-Semitism? It's like, if you understand the theory and the definition of what is anti-Semitism, then you can define things that happen more clearly.
So bringing that kind of full circle into context in the Middle East and the history of the Jewish people. I know there is not a brief history of the Jewish people, right? But can we try and do a very kind of quick summary of the history of the Jewish people and the current geopolitical lens today?
So I can try. I'm not a Jewish scholar by any means. We do presentations, and we always start with, I'm glad, Marnie, you asked that, because we always start on understanding Judaism, because people don't understand Judaism. And Jews, let's just start with the fact that Jews make up about 1% of the world population. Okay.
Which is tiny when you think about that, right?
Tiny.
Like tiny, tiny, tiny.
In fact, according to my latest statistic, we're like a quarter of the 1%. And so the fact that, Christians are 33%, Muslims are about 25%, Hindus are about 15%. There's all these other religions, right, that are in our global landscape. And in the Middle East, you've got Israel, and the Jews have had a presence in Israel back to biblical times for over 2,000 years. Like, we are indigenous to this land. Okay. So therefore, if you understand that, there's no way the arguments like that Israel is a colonizer can be true, because colonizers go somewhere else, use the population often for bringing back riches, money, minerals to a motherland, right? There's no place else for the Jews to go. We have been kicked out, and just a history. We're often kicked out of places that we've been in the diaspora, right? So the Second Temple falls under the Romans, 70 AD, and the Jews that have been central in Jerusalem get dispersed throughout the world. We go to Iran, we go to Greece, we go to France, we go to Africa, we go to all other countries. And we're tolerated in those countries sometimes persecuted, sometimes expelled, the Spanish Inquisition, the Iranian regime. And, we have to continue to wander until we have a Jewish homeland, right? And in Israel, any Jew across the world can go there and make aliyah, which means that you can go and become a citizen there.
And that's today.
That's today, in modern day, right? And Israel is a democracy, right? It's a pivotal partner for the US and for democracies around the world. And if you look at a map of all the other countries around, the Arab countries around, you'll see Israel is a tiny, tiny, tiny portion of that area with this enormous responsibility. And now to bring in a little bit about the Palestinians is the Palestinians have also lived in other countries and also have a piece that they feel indigenous to that land. And that's where I believe in a two-state solution. I believe that the Palestinians need their own sovereignty from a government that will actually govern, not from a terrorist organization.
So can we clarify the difference, when we think about the Palestinian people, a lot of people, I feel like, think that, Hamas are freedom fighters and they're fighting for the freedom of the Palestinian people. And I don't agree with that. I think Hamas is a terrorist organization, and I don't know that they really care at all about the Palestinian people. I think they have, their objectives. Can you talk about that a little bit?
I can. It's going to make me really upset. Yes, I can. I mean, I do all the time. Hamas is a terrorist organization. Hamas has stated very clearly their intention, right? Which is to make sure that there is no Israel, to annihilate the Jewish people. This is in their charter document. This is not in Israel's parliamentary documents. Israel is not out to destroy, annihilate a people. So let's just start there.
Including the Palestinians.
Including the Palestinians, right. Hamas is also backed by Iran. Okay. And Hamas's top leaders don't live in Gaza. They live in other countries, and they fund this terrorist organization, not just this organization, but other terrorist organizations. And Hamas is a religious movement. Okay. And so it is from an Islamic fundamentalist regime that are not for women's rights. They're not for LGBTQ rights. Right. And they get hundreds of millions of dollars. And for the last 15 years, they've been building over 300 miles of tunnels. There's, like we say, there's two Gazas. There's the Gaza up above the ground, and then there's a whole underground system. And if they were really freedom fighters for the Palestinian people, what do people need to be free in their land, right? What do they need? Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, right? And if that was true, then wouldn't Hamas be investing in things that would bring that to the Palestinian people?
And the Palestinian people would be flourishing, right? They'd be building schools, and it would just be so different.
It would be so different. And unfortunately, Hamas has also, I'll just end with this, has expressed their theology over and over and said the attacks on October 7th, they're prepared to have that happen again and again. That they feel bringing freedom to Gazans is based in murder and rape and beheading and taking hostages. To me, that's not freedom fighters.
No. So what would you say to, the students in the US who think that Israel is really behind all of this, and, that Hamas didn't do any of this? They're just responding to Israel provoking this attack on October 7th.
Yeah, I mean, I would actually ask them, which values are you supporting? What are you really supporting? And what are you putting your energy behind? Because what if you're supporting, the chant from the river to the sea, Palestinian will be free, which is rooted in the PLO movement with Yasser Arafat. That's an origination statement from there. So if you're supporting that movement, what's going to happen if that movement wins?
And can you explain what that means? Because
Yeah.
I don't think a lot of people understand that chant.
Yeah, so from the river to the sea means Palestine will be free. It means from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea, all the land in there, they want it to be ruled by Hamas. They don't want, it doesn't make room for Israel or for Jews, right? And so it's actually a call for elimination of Israel and the Jewish people. It's not for a two-state solution. It's not for let Israel govern in a democracy. These are really two different things.
And do you believe that all those college students or young adults that are protesting, free Palestine, et cetera, do they actually understand what they're saying and the impact? I know you're doing a lot from an education standpoint, which is important, and this conversation is important, but I have a hard time believing that all these young adults in America right now really, if they fully, truly understood what they were saying, would be out there protesting in that way.
I mean, Stephanie, that's the magic question, right? And that's why it's really important to ask people that question. Do you really understand? Do you really believe that? Because that chant, I mean, we know that words, we have the history. We know that the words then are the first step, right? To escalating justification for policies, for laws, for discrimination, for genocide. We know in our bones as Jews where it can begin. Hitler didn't have a slogan that said, build Auschwitz and put all the Jews in the ovens. He started with words. And not to equate this, I don't want to equate it same, because that would be historically not what I wanted to do. But your question is really, really important because people do justify free Palestine now is different than from the river to the sea. Palestine will be free. We really also can make that distinction. And we understand, we hear a lot of young people, a lot of young Jewish people saying, I say free Palestine because I want the liberation of the Palestinian people. Okay, I hear you, and so do I. But they're not going to be liberated as if Hamas remains in control. And then you can get into the history of who Hamas is. And you can also, I can hold what we say often to people when we talk to them is you have to hold multiple truths during this time. You just have to, and we can. Our hearts are big enough to hold empathy for the Israelis and for the Palestinian innocent civilians, because both sides deserve sovereignty, justice, security, and their needs are not being met. And we have to start there. And we can. Our brains are big enough and our hearts are big enough. And
I was just, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I interrupted you.
I was just going to say, but yet we have to remove Hamas, right? Like that has to happen. For what you're talking about to happen, right? It's almost like free Palestine from Hamas, right?
Right. And so that's where you have to learn the history. And people don't learn this history. It's been complicated. There's been peace talks started and stopped, and you need to know why, right? You need to know what was going on, and it's just not taught. And so when we go in, we have a presentation that we've built. And we do this many times a week with many different groups. And, we spend a chunk of the time talking about Israel history. And people say, I never got this. And it's been complicated, and it's not mandatory to teach in schools. And kids are now getting.
I was just going to say beyond that, Israel's not perfect, right?
Israel's not perfect.
And they have a lot of policies and issues and, a government that a lot of people really dislike. But yet, that doesn't mean that they should be wiped out.
Exactly. There's a difference. There crosses a line. Netanyahu was just, there were massive marches in Israel before October 7th, led by Israelis because of a policy Netanyahu was trying to do with the judicial system. So Israelis and Jews themselves criticize the government of Israel, right? The housing policies have not been popular, and they're not, in my opinion, right in the settler areas. And Israel has moved Jews out of that to make sure that, the land can be for the Palestinians. That's not popular. But Marnie, that distinction of what you just said is exactly it. There's a difference between criticizing a government. There's a difference between a government having to have occupational forces to protect their citizens than calling for the annihilation and violence against a group of people. And P.S., we now, like, the ripple effect is now happening locally and around the world.
And that's what I think is scary for people. And like you just said, this is not a political issue. This is humanitarian. This is just basic human rights we're talking about here. So yes, there's a lot of complications with Israel and politics, like you mentioned, but like for the moment, let's, maybe leave that out of this for right now. So you mentioned that there's a lot of these, there's a lot of rhetoric and a lot of terms being thrown around, like you mentioned, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. Are there any other big ones that you think would help to share with people today so that they understand when they hear something on the news or in one of these, protests, just to kind of
for
clarify?
Instance, yes. I hear all the time, well, it's an apartheid state. That one just is so frustrating to me.
Mm-hmm. Or it's genocide.
Or genocide, right?
Right. Yeah, so yes, I can talk to both of those. So Israel's not, committing a genocide. And if you understand the definition of what a genocide is, like we said, you have to take into account the intent of a government, right? And when a government becomes a genocidal government, they have laws that call for the annihilation of an entire people wherever they are. Okay. And so then they put measures in place to decrease that population. So, Israel has not occupied Gaza since 2005. There are Palestinians that work in Israel. There are Palestinians. I just heard there's on the Supreme Court in Israel. I haven't had a chance to fact check that. But I've asked other people, and that came from a scholar in the field, and I didn't know that. And the Palestinian population has increased. It's not decreasing. So there are definitely facts that point to that it's not a genocide. And again, Marnie, what you said before is Israel's target is not the Palestinian people, right? Israel's target is Hamas.
And unfortunately, Hamas is using the Palestinian people to hide, right? Behind them. So it looks like Israel is targeting the Palestinian people, when in fact, Hamas is using the Palestinian people as shields.
And I just did see on the news last night, because they're at the Al-Shifa hospital complex, the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, the army, is there. They got there, and they actually found proof and had videos of weapons, of other army supplies in the basement of this complex. And they think hostages are being held there in the tunnels. So, after Israel saying this is actually a war crime committed by Hamas to put innocent civilians in this harm's way. And this is something that is really important proof of what Israel has been saying all along. And that's why they're not just bombing Gaza, right? They can't. They know they have. Israel knows it has to be incredibly specific, incredibly precise in their targeting, because the world is watching and the world is blaming them, which is anti-Semitism alive and well.
And that's a lot of that comes from the news sources. and the TV and the papers that we're reading, and there's so much misinformation. Can you help our listeners understand just as far as how they can get credible news sources and what to kind of watch out for, because it's all over the place.
Right. It is all over the place. I subscribe to the Free Press. That's one of my sources. I'm probably biased in this. I have been watching CNN. I think the reporting has been fair. I do. I've seen them interview Palestinian professors that work on universities. So I can't really speak in depth to that. My colleagues, at the JCRC actually have a whole session on that. I can't. I actually learned from them the sources. Sorry.
It's hard.
That's helpful.
You have to try. I mean, I've been reading the Times of Israel, which obviously is an Israeli news source. I love the Free Press as well. I think you have to dabble and see what's being reported from different sides and how it feels, right?
Right.
And maybe not even assume that your typical news source that you either frequented or did not frequent, be open-minded to all news sources, not what you previously associated with.
Right. And double check with more than one source.
Right.
Right. There's also, information is really key also at this time, because first of all, going back to the young people, where are they getting their news? Right.
TikTok and
TikTok. I actually went on TikTok this morning before our conversation. I don't go on very often, and I had to go off. I was so disturbed by what I was
seeing.
And
who owns TikTok?
China.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Right.
And so, here we're trying to educate our kids. And so, Stephanie, I'm super glad you asked about sources. I wish I had just a deeper answer. But you mean to tell me these educated kids that we're sending to universities and colleges around the country are really relying on TikTok, which is owned by China, for their information? We know what happened during the last election. It's proven that there are other countries that are infiltrating our social media to get us to be divided and to get us to buy into these extreme ideas. That is alive and well in America and on social media.
And that's a really good reminder, because I think sometimes we have short-term memory about what happened 3 years ago.
Yeah. So I join a lot of webinars that are put on by these institutions around the world, or, the institutions that are set up to study anti-Semitism. I like to learn from the scholars and the thought leaders out there.
Well, and I thought, we're talking about the kids on college campuses, and I listened to a podcast that you actually recommended to me, I think, Laura, by Sam Harris, the Making Sense podcast. And he talks about this extreme moral confusion. And I really like the way he said that, because that's what it seems like it is. It's like all this moral confusion. And I think that he really clearly lays out how most people in the West still don't understand the problem of jihadism. I don't know if you can talk about that at all.
No, yes, I can. It was an excellent podcast. And he talks about really understanding what we're fighting, right? And really understanding the power of religious thought in Islamic fundamentalist world. And that's why I was clear, Hamas is a religious organization. And if you understand what Israel is, which is a democracy, which is, one of the most liberal societies, Tel Aviv is one of the most liberal cities, right? With equal rights and rights for all kind of, LGBTQ people, and really a forefront in that. Yeah, for everybody. And, tech and what they're building. It's just not apples to apples, and you need to understand, I think what he said is just, you need to understand the persistence of the ideology behind a jihad. And a jihad is called for against Jews. And they're starting in Israel, but they won't stop in Israel. And how dangerous that thought is. Because at the end of the day, they feel that if they can do this, that they'll go to heaven. Like they're not just here in the mindset. The mindset isn't just, what can I do right here on earth? It's what will my payoff be in what they call paradise. And that is just really important to understand.
Yeah. And I think that podcast was excellent. And we'll link that up in the show notes because, I mean, he gave some great examples and I think it's very clear.
And moral confusion was a great term, especially talking about, what the young people and what's happening on campuses. And I just want to say that we had a program where Governor Walz came to I think it was like the week after October 7th happened. And he used the words moral clarity. And I just want to say, as a Minnesotan, as a teacher, Governor Walz was a teacher. He was very clear that now is the time for everybody to have moral clarity. And the importance of leaders being able to articulate that is huge, and that's what we call on when we go into schools for casework. We want to meet with the leaders because the students, the teachers, they need to have direction from the leaders about moral clarity. And can you set that? Can you live up to the values that you have designed for your school or for your district? And that's the question that we often ask.
Are you finding that you're getting pushback from some of these school leaders when you want to come in and explain the perspective or I don't even know what to call it?
So I don't know if I'd say pushback as much as I would say moral confusion.
Okay.
We understand principals and teachers their students are incredibly diverse and they come from all different kinds of backgrounds and they hold beliefs, like we talked about earlier, that the Palestinian people deserve freedom. And so we want to say to them, we do too. We do too. And who are the teachers that can go deeper into the history? Because we also need these students to grow up and understand the complexity and the nuances that have happened in the Middle East, because we need you guys to be leaders for the next generation to, God willing, bring peace to many areas, especially this area. So we actually say, who are the teachers that can do this? Because it's not one program coming in and giving a lecture, right? It's really teachers designing units that can, in the most balanced way, present the history of both people here and take it out of this emotional war that's happening right now and understand it at just a deeper educational level.
Well, and it makes me think about the program you talked about earlier, the bias within us. And a lot of people do have bias. And, there's
everybody
people that
Mm-hmm.
maybe haven't even met a Jewish person before, and they just go by what they hear. And and
they feel they have to take sides.
Right.
One of the things we really want to get across, again, is that holding multiple truths. And don't in your classroom make this a binary issue. Don't think it has to be pro-Israel or pro-Palestine, because you've already defeated so much of the way we want people to hold multiple truths.
Right.
And that's, Marnie, getting back to your question about apartheid. The apartheid analogy to South Africa, is just inaccurate. There isn't a superior government in Gaza holding what they consider an inferior group down. They're not outlawing language. They're not, having, they take the word occupation and they misuse it.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So,
because Israel hasn't occupied Gaza for years.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Hamas has been in control of Gaza, and they removed their rivals, Fatah, in an election.
I mean, just getting back to the education piece and what you're doing, this is clearly what needs to happen, starting at a young age. And you're one organization, but what else can we be doing out there? I feel like it's going to take everyone or lots of people.
Exactly. Stephanie.
Going back to this moral clarity, which I really like that Tim said, I don't know, because it does, kids are influenced by what they hear in the classroom and what they hear other people saying and their parents, right? Just think about children and teenagers.
Right. And so what I say to my colleagues, my neighbors, we all say, my friends, please talk to your kids. Please talk to their friends. Please. These conversations can't just be, the responsibility of the school. Seek out sources on the JCRC resource page.
Which we'll link up in the show notes.
Thank you. We have lots of resources. We have Voices from Gaza. I mean, we have talking points from the JCRC in San Francisco. Like we have ADL resources for the classroom. Like, please, this is a war between a democracy and a jihadist group. And that's a really, really big statement. And what does that mean? We have kids that were born after 9/11, right? We have kids, we all need to be in this conversation. So educate yourself, and then have the conversation and listen to where also the young people are. Like we say, you gotta meet them where they are. They often feel, I see they as a general, young people that are identifying Free Palestine, they're identifying with the oppression of the Palestinian people, and they're putting the sole responsibility on Israel. And if you can break down, where's Hamas funded? Yes, acknowledging that there is pain. There is a lot of pain and suffering and death. And the occupation has not been good for the Palestinian people and has not been good for Israel. And Israel cannot rebuild occupying Gaza. And you'll hear that conversation on the news now. Israel cannot occupy Gaza. And I feel that it's not going to be the right solution. And that's why we need people growing up, understanding how difficult diplomacy is and the nuances in the history.
And one thing you said to me, Laura, when we were talking the other day is, discuss supporting an ideology. And I really, really liked that. That made a lot of sense to me. And ask yourself, what are you supporting?
Mm-hmm.
Because at the end of the day, like you said, it's jihad or it's a democracy. What do you want?
Mm-hmm.
And, are you, if you're identifying as Free Palestine, are you ready to go live in Gaza under Hamas? Is that the life that you want to live?
Right. I think, Marnie, that's an excellent conversation. What are you supporting? And understand the ideologies behind these movements.
Yeah.
So one question we didn't touch on yet, and I feel like we're going backwards a little bit in this conversation, but it's just one that you consistently hear and read about, is ceasefire. And, certain groups saying, we need a ceasefire, and other, it's obviously from Israeli standpoint, no. And so can you talk a little bit about that and why it's not a solution?
Yeah. So, ceasefire, as I interpret it to be, people calling for a ceasefire, I think, don't understand the deep rooted, again, ideology. And I think that podcast did a good job of explaining this is what Hamas believes. And they believe it so deeply in their religious beliefs, right? And Christian fundamentalists, that's why you'll see that they understand this mindset. We're up against a group that is not going to give up that ideology. So if there is a ceasefire, it doesn't root out the seed of the problem, which is anti-Semitism, which is annihilating the Jewish people. That doesn't go away with a book or a film or a peace talk. That needs to be defunded, deactivated. And so, and then on the flip side, I do like that I saw there was a pause for humanitarian aid to get through. I just saw on the news that Israel is sending incubators for the babies in the hospital, that there are babies there that need the oxygen and they need the service, the medical service.
But that's not being reported on mainstream news. You have to dig for that, which I find frustrating. But anyway.
And they need a middle person to get the supplies in. They need Egypt, or they need Jordan, or they need a middle government to cooperate. And then they need Hamas to accept it. Right. And so, we can go back to other issues that have happened. Why did it take so long for Egypt to open up that border in the south for people why did it take so long for them to send buses? Like, other countries need to come up and help. And why are they not helping? So a ceasefire also, people don't understand that Israelis and Jews at their deep level understand when they call for annihilation of a people, how far it can go. So that's why, in my opinion, a ceasefire does not work at this time, that the Israeli government, the IDF, know that they, again, have to go in. They can't flood these tunnels. They can't, cut off oxygen in these tunnels, right? They have to find the tunnels that are connected to residences so that less innocent civilians get hurt or get killed. They have to be really precise, and there's not cell phone coverage. There's not GPS down there. These are miles below the ground.
Not to mention there's a lot of hostages down there.
Not to mention, they're trying to recover life, and they're very clear in that they want to get to the commanders of Hamas and the command centers.
Well, thank you for that.
Sure.
Explanation.
Is there anything else, Laura, that we haven't, I know there's so much, but anything else that you want to share with our audience that we haven't touched on that you feel is really important for people to know or think about?
I do. And because of the work that I'm doing and my colleagues are doing at the JCRC, I want teachers and other students and parents to understand that the impact that it's having locally on Jewish students, that we're seeing Jewish students being bullied in school, harassed, just bombarded with messages that are trying to be divisive. And that's super harmful. Some Jewish students are, scared to wear their Jewish star, or scared to speak up that they're Jewish, or questioning who their friends are. And that is an incredibly stressful atmosphere for those kids to be living in, for that to be the atmosphere in your school classrooms, in the hallways, in choir practice, at recess, on school, at school team practices. And I just think, our Jewish students, they don't need to feel more isolated or discriminated against by their peers. That this is a time I want to call on the teachers and the administrators in schools to really pay attention. Don't be absent in this conversation, because it's happening. It's happening. I can tell you there is not, I think we're talking to over 25 districts right now.
Wow.
And this is, we know anti-Semitism is up 400%. And I'm not calling everything that's happening in the schools anti-Semitic at all. What I'm saying is pay attention to your Jewish students. Don't call them out to be representatives of this incredibly complex history. Just know that this is happening and know that it's really complicated. But be there in this conversation.
Yeah, so important. I think that's how we started this conversation, was that we need to be having more conversations.
Mhm.
and not to shy away from it, but to get facts and resources and educate yourself so that you can help others.
And you
And
two are perfect
hopefully-
examples. You two are perfect examples, because I know this podcast, doesn't deal often in wars. Maybe you guys have before, but just a huge thank you from me and from the staff at the JCRC.
Yeah,
Well,
I mean,
I mean,
it's so important to both of us. And
Yeah.
obviously, I'm Jewish, and I have felt nothing but pain and sadness since October 7th. And it's been weighing on me. And I've shared so much with Stephanie, and I think it's been weighing on her. And it's like, we just want to do something.
Right.
Yeah.
And
I
we
mean,
all
how can
know
people be
someone.
living well? How can you live well when all this is going on?
Exactly. And Stephanie,
So-
to just bring it into human connectionness, right? Like, we all know someone. If we don't know someone involved personally, we know someone who knows someone. And
Absolutely.
my son was a camp counselor locally, and one of his campers was killed in the first attack on October 7th. And the boy, Netta Epstein, was 20 years old.
He was my son's good
Yeah.
friend. They were in camp together for many years.
And Netta, God rest his soul, threw himself on a grenade that was thrown into a safe house to save his girlfriend, is a story I have heard. I'm sure there's more around it. But the pain and the enormity of this situation affects every Jew.
And I think that's something that's been really eye-opening for me, because I have a few close Jewish friends, and there's like 1 degree. There's no 6 degrees of separation between a Jewish person here and in Israel. You're all very interconnected, and just
And
at
Marnie,
a heart
I
level
didn't,
too.
Marnie, I didn't realize that you're also had the connection to Netta.
Yeah. And
Sorry, Stephanie, I interrupted you.
No, that's okay.
I was just going to say, I remember, so Stephanie and I went to a conference in Florida for health and wellness right after October 7th. And I was kind of a mess the whole trip. And she kept saying, what can somebody do? What I have other Jewish friends, like, what should I do? And I was like, well, educate yourself, and also just reach out to them. You don't have to do anything. Just see if they're okay. And I think that for non-Jewish people out there, I think that's so important for your Jewish friends to just hear from you and know that you're thinking about them, and hopefully asking questions and trying to understand what's going on.
I completely agree. And for Stephanie to acknowledge that, and to try and build a bridge right into this space, that's huge. And so it's just huge on an emotional level, on a historical level. This is going to be a long fight.
Yeah.
So if you could ask people to do one thing that are listening to this episode, what would you ask them to do?
I guess educate yourself. Really take some time, go on, read reputable sources, join a podcast, understand, and like what we were just talking about, don't be afraid to ask a Jewish person, your Jewish friend, a professional, help me understand this better. Here's my question, because I think again, we have to also listen to where people are entering the conversation. And so that helps us, right? And seek out the resource page that we have. So educate yourself would be my number 1 request.
Yeah. Thank you. So Laura, as we wrap up this conversation, one final question that we love asking all of our guests is, what does the art of living well mean to you?
For me, living well means first and foremost self-care for myself, my mind, my heart, my soul. These times are calling on really challenging work. So I need the walks. I need the socializing with my friends. I need the physical workout. I need the time by myself. That is what living well right now in these times mean for me. And then I'm just stronger to absorb the news, to have the conversations that are hours long, to understand what is really happening, because it's really, really hard and it's really, really traumatic.
And it's shocking, right? Like,
And it's
you think never again, right? And then here we are.
right. And it is really going to take, our collective want to live well, right? Our collective desire to build a different society, whether it's in the Middle East or whether it's on campuses or whether it's within our family, that is what is going to drive us, right? I mean, I'm sure like many other families, I have a family group chat on text with my kids and my son's girlfriend. And at first, when it first started, I was like, oh, they're going to just roll their eyes when I post this or send them this blog. And I was like, you know what? I need to lead as a mother and a professional in this time and send them news sources that I'm listening to, that I'm getting my information from. And that to me is how I also teach them to live well, right? Bring these conversations into your dinner club, Shabbat dinners, Christmas dinners. And while it may not be the most popular thing to talk about, you'll learn a lot if you can listen.
Yes,
absolutely.
And it's uncomfortable a little bit, but you have to get over that hesitation in order to ultimately, I think we all want the same thing. Most of us want the same thing.
We want the hostages to come home and be in peace. We want the Palestinians to be able to govern themselves by a government, not a terrorist organization. And we want Israel to be more fair-minded as a government, but to eradicate Hamas.
100%.
Yeah.
You said it all so well. And we so appreciate you coming on and talking about this with us.
Well, thank you. I mean, again, this is exactly what needs to happen. I can't thank you enough. When you guys reached out to me, I was like, oh my God, you two are just the best to invite this conversation in. And so I'm very grateful for it this morning.
Well, thank you.
Yes,
we're grateful for you too. So
we are grateful for all the work you're doing, and please let us know where we can see your exhibit or how we can see the exhibit at some point.
I can meet you in LA. I'll be going in that could be January.
Well, I might send my family because my husband's family's in LA.
Okay, to the Japanese American Museum. I can send you guys a link to where the tour is going to be once they have it up on the website.
That would be amazing.
Will it be coming back to Minnesota anytime soon?
No, it goes from California to Colorado. I think Texas is in there. And then we go to the Northeast.
Okay.
Yeah. You can see a lot of it online. If you Google The Bias Inside Us, there's actually an online interactive piece, a learning piece to it.
Well, that'll be cool. We'll find it and link it up for everyone.
Oh, great. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Laura. And we wish you a beautiful day.
Thank you. Same to you.
Bye-bye.